Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today's presentation is really going to be over responsible gambling and how we can look at this as a win-win proposition for all in the gaming industry. And this is actually meant to be a presentation that was a masterclass spread out over an entire day. So I'm going to be trying to condense as much information as I can and really give you the meat of the content and make sure that you're walking away with a pretty good overview and base knowledge of what really is responsible gambling and how to implement it into your programs or use it to modify existing programs or improve existing programs. So we're going to talk about everything in between, from identifying recreational gambling and problem gambling to resources for responsible gaming and problem gambling resources, treatment, developing individualized gambling programs, and just learning practical RG tools, a few things that you could take away and implement right away into your programs. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the costs and the benefits of having a plan and some of the simpler forms of creating these. So again, we're going to go through a lot of information pretty quickly, but I'll leave my information at the end of the webinar slide, so you can contact me or email me if you have other questions. And please feel free to comment, give suggestions. What are your takeaways? What was beneficial? What would you like to see more of in the future? So in terms of responsible gambling, what is it? We've been hearing about it for so long lately, and it's really designed to ensure the safety of our customers. I mean, that's kind of create a safe, enjoyable environment. And what does that look like? How do you create a responsible gambling plan that is safe? But in today's time, responsible gambling plans extend beyond just the customer. So we want to look at creating good, solid, positive plans that also help, the patrons, the customers, the employees, and even extending on out into the community. So we want to create a safe environment for all, because we know everybody can benefit from a good responsible gambling plan. So historically, this has really been viewed as like a regulatory requirement, a checkbox. I need to be in compliance or regulation to avoid fines, or because I have to have it. And from what my experience has been, there's not a lot of understanding of, what are the reasons, for this? What are the real reasons that we have some of these RG standards in place, and are also even what is responsible gambling, or how do I even go about starting to create a program? Because when we think about corporate social responsibility, really that means anybody who makes a profit off of gambling is required to have a responsible gambling policy on some level in their agency or their organization. And so, historically, brick and mortar casinos had a pretty good idea of how to do this, but now as we're moving into online sports betting, lotto, there's so many various forms of gambling, and gambling industry's changing, gaming and gambling are merging. And so now what do these policies look like? And then how can we modify them to fit our organization? So with in regard to responsible gaming regulation, there's several gaming organizations out there right now that have done a really good job about putting together some basic guidelines, some suggestions, and codes of conduct. So just even looking at these and learning more about them, getting a feel for them, can help you start to understand some of the reasons behind that, and some also ways to create and implement your own policies. So just going to touch on a few of these organizations, and you can find them on the web, and most of them have brochures or pamphlets or information to help with that. And so the American Gaming Association has published Responsible Gaming Code of Conduct. And this can be actually used as a really good framework to get an idea of what you want your RG policy to look like, or maybe if you need to improve it, in certain areas of improvement. The National Council on Problem Gambling has guidelines. They also talk about sports betting and online. The Center for Responsible Gambling, ICRG, and even the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, IGRA, also includes sections on responsible gambling. And we talk about again, the various people who can benefit or who needs the corporate social responsibility. And that goes back to tribal gaming, to small restaurants that have gaming in them, to lotto, to even gas stations that have gaming. So it really covers a broad spectrum. So the various codes of conduct, again, guidelines and suggestions, a good framework, and it will give you a good working framework as well with more information. But then, how do we really take what's there and apply it? What does that really look like on the inside of the organization? And so what we know is first identifying your basic RG standards in your state or your jurisdiction. What does that look like? Every state or jurisdiction standards vary slightly. So check within your own realm. Even within tribal gaming, there's different variations of that. And so we want to identify, where are your establishments at? What kind of gaming are they online? What are the needs? What are the needs of your company? What, is your company big? Is your company small? A RG program for a large casino that has 5,000 employees is going to look much different or vary in many ways from a small casino and rural state tribal gaming that might have only 50 machines. So really understanding the regulations in comparison to what your establishment is. And some of the high notes within this framework, and the AGA or NCRG and even IGRA, some of the things that they cover, and I'm just going over a few of the high notes, is the employee training. This is a big one, and this can come in many forms too. It can come in-person training, it can come in online training, it can come in yearly refresher courses. So it can be very different again according to the gaming establishment. Public awareness efforts, and this is a lot of times basically even just as much as a brochure. Do you have a brochure? Do you have 1-800 numbers up? Do you have things in the bathroom, awareness campaigns? Are you running, a yearly problem gambling awareness month? So this can look very different, but again, it's picking what can fit within your framework and what's doable. Some organizations have a lot of money to spend to promote on marketing material, and others are limited in what they can utilize. So some of these policies include self-exclusion. Again, some establishments have them, some don't. What does the policy look like? Are you tracking? There's levels even within that. Another code of conduct would be giving back for treatment and research. What we know is treatment's super underfunded. Research is very limited. In problem gambling, we can find all the research in the world on, drugs and alcohol and Suboxone and other addictions. But with gambling, it's still very new to the field, gambling addiction. And, the research monies that go into that also can fund programs looking at higher risk populations, like, in the Native communities. We need more research in that area, and maybe any prevalence rates and new prevalence studies, so we can actually see what's really happening on the other side. Property signage, this can be big signage, little signage, putting ads out, responsible gambling ads. I mean, it can vary. And financial instruments, even within. And again, I'm just touching on the high points. And this can look like limit setting policies within your company. It could be ATMs. Are you having a no paycheck cashing policy? Are you not accepting benefit checks, etc.? So again, these can go very deep, but just touching on them on the top. The differences in the type of gaming too, as well. So these efforts are going to look different, like say in a public sector casino versus tribal gaming establishment that's in a more rural area of the state, whether it's online or even lotto. So now if we go back to looking about, okay, so what is problem gambling? And how can we tell the difference between recreational and problem gambling? And really, it's a fine line. And responsible gambling programs are really meant to be preventative measures. Just something, it's not going to stop people from gambling by any means. It's just meant to be like, if people are having problems, or, that the information's there, it can help mitigate the harms that could come from, gambling related problems. And what we know is also gamblers can cost an establishment, one gambler can cost an establishment millions of dollars. Coming from the treatment world and working with gambling addiction for the majority of my career, there's not a lot I haven't seen. But in terms of, okay, how do we be able to recognize this? Because this is also a protection for the company and even for the employees. And so we know when people gamble, most people can gamble for fun. Most people won't ever have any problems with this, but there are going to be that percentage that crossed the line. And when they cross the line into problem gambling, it begins to look a lot different. The behavior begins to look a lot different. And some of the red flags are, you know, betting higher amounts than normal, lying and stealing to get money, aggressive behavior is often coming along with that. We'll see, changes in the amount of time that's spent. Tolerance comes in form of, not, if I have an alcohol problem, I need to drink more alcohol. Tolerance with gambling tends to come with more time and more money. So I was betting $5 machines. Now I'm betting, $100 a play. So there's different identifications. And also just being able to, in your employee trainings, train within your staff, just basic signs and symptoms, knowing that, these aren't clinical people, but just to be aware, because if I can start to notice these, then now I can start to address them. And having within your policies, toolkits, right? How do I approach these people? What's okay to say? What's acceptable to say? How can I offer help or guidance? How can I offer the responsible gambling policy as a resource without crossing the lines and trying to keep everybody safe at the same time? So gambling is a real addiction. It lives right next to drug and alcohol now. It used to live in the DSM, which is the Clinical Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, under impulse control not otherwise classified. It was there with trichomania and kleptomania. But in the last few years, it's actually moved over beside drug and alcohol. So we know it is considered a real addiction. There is treatment available. Problem gambling treatment is treated differently than drug and alcohol, although there are many similarities. There are also many differences too. And so even when you're looking at your own state treatment resources or treatment providers, almost every state or every jurisdiction will have like a national council on problem gambling or a council on, responsible gaming, and then also treatment providers. And if you're even working on your resource guides or your pamphlets, identifying who your treatment partners are and, working with them, because you never know when you're going to need them. They can be great help for trainings or to come in and to help mitigate problems at times too. So identifying the resources within your own state, and that can be built into your problem gambling or your responsible gaming program as well. And so what we know with problem gambling is some people that won't be addicted will still show problems, but having these resources in place could actually prevent them from crossing the line, and at the end of the day, save you guys a lot of money and a lot of headache. So responsible gaming practices are the additional resource tools as well. So if we look at going back to, I want a responsible gaming program. I'm not really sure what to do or how to create one, or I have one and maybe we need to modify it or update it, or it's 15 years old, and what can we do to make some changes and actually make these changes where you can see the benefits within your organization. So when you're developing and implementing the programs, it's a really good idea to go back and again, look at your state statutes, look at your guidelines, who are your governing bodies, who are the regulators, what are the suggestions, and then what is your establishment looking like, and then creating that individualized plan for each, because it's not one size fits all. Not every RG program is going to look the same, and that's okay. And it doesn't have to be complex and complicated. Just keep it simple. And what is right for my organization? So even if you're a gaming company or a manufacturer, you can still have a really good, cost-efficient, responsible gaming program within your organization, even if it's just through training and signage and supporting foundations and even your own employees. So there's so many levels and depth to building a responsible gaming program. And this can be, we have people that go super in depth and they want a very layered approach of protection, or somebody that just is able to do minimal or just above minimal compliance standards. And it's okay, but it's just a matter of finding what's right for your organization. And so even we talked about the depth of the programs. We don't just want to look at internal or external compliance. External compliance is kind of what I would consider, signage on the outside, Do I have brochures available? Do I have, covering all the external bases? Is information easily and accessible? Or do I have employee training? But then if you want to go more internal, we can look at other levels, such as, even within the HR, or much more in depth with the employee training, because what we know is that there are certain risk factors into developing gambling addiction. And one of those is, do you live in a low economic area? Do you live within 50 miles of a casino? And are you an employee of a casino? And all of those have higher risk factors in developing an addiction. So if you're a casino and you're employing 5,000 people, I guarantee you some of your employees are dealing with gambling problems in-house. And this can also lead to embezzlement, theft, days off from work, absences, unexplained illnesses. So it actually going back into the company, costing the company money for even employees that are struggling with gambling problems. And so, these RG programs can go as deep as looking into human resources. I've had, big casinos where their employees were costing them, over $500,000 just in absences, theft, embezzlement, etc., and then needed to go into treatment. But the insurance that the casino provided actually did not cover gambling treatment. It would cover drug and alcohol, but it didn't cover gambling. So even those little things like looking into your HR, looking into your insurance policies, and if you are promoting responsible gambling programs, just making sure that your insurance is actually cover that, because it's going to be the employees or people on the inside that's going to benefit from that, and also be a benefit in saving money. And so there are other responsible gambling tools that can really be beneficial and effective, and that can be, even having different ambassador programs within the company, or easy access to outside resources, hotlines, treatment centers, etc. So again, that can look very different as well. If we go back to looking at, the cost and benefits, right? And again, we talked on internal and external, but the benefits really outweigh the costs. And again, implementing RG programs does not have to be costly, expensive, or complex. They can be very simple, and you can go from like a consultant to a company, such as Clarion that does the master classes or the live trainings, to other establishments such as iGaming Academy, who offers online. And so really picking and choosing your program, and again, what's the better fit for your organization. And even from having these guidelines in place, if I'm being aware, I'm watching out what's happening, I can mitigate possible gambling harms. I've had gamblers to cost casinos over $1 million because, a slip and fall, and then they decide to sue because they're needing money. They lost the money, they're chasing the losses, or stabbings, or, just robberies, things that are happening out in the parking lot that can reflect back and be a cost to the establishment that, through a good RG program, a lot of that can actually be mitigated or reduced. So even in the embezzlement, internal and fraudulent checks, etc., right? So it can run really deep. And implementing RG as a long-term business model, if you're making slow integrated changes, this doesn't have to be costly, and it can actually, reduce the overall expense of implementing a policy for a company. And then creating the RG culture. So if you are implementing this and it just becomes kind of your way of being in the company, then people will start thinking RG. They're going to be more aware to the harms, looking for ways to be able to create positive energy around the programs versus I get a slap on the wrist, or it's compliance, or I just need a checkbox. How can you really integrate a good RG program into your existing company? And it's really easy to do. And this is still changing. All these guidelines, AGA, everybody's putting out right now to help with this and help increase awareness and knowledge around this is still changing. And with, gaming and gambling merging again and going into, what is gaming, what is gambling now, online stuff, esports, sports betting. There's still RG policies, a lot of them still in the works, but these can be modified to fit those changing types of gaming you might bring in. So you're going from one class of gaming to another. You just modify your policies and programs around that. And in terms of looking at uh, what can what's going to happen, what is this going to look like after after everything reopens. I know with the shutdown and all the issues that are having, there's just a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainties. Now's a really good time to start looking at your RG programs, and even after the reopening, they might need to be modified or changed, kind of based on what happened. That's still a to be continued issue, and a lot more when we have a lot of time. And again, this was really meant to be an entire masterclass where we could go through and help create systems and allow you to walk away with a handful of tools that you could go implement today. But hopefully this gives you some food for thought and enough information that you can start thinking about new programs or existing programs, or even just something as simple as, oh, I don't have brochures out. Let's just put some brochures out, and that's still having corporate social responsibility and still providing a good solid responsible gaming policy and information for people. So small changes can be made, and if you have any more questions or ideas or need help with building policies, and this goes for tribal gaming, online, casino establishments, restaurants that might have gaming. There's a way to create a program to fit whatever your needs are and to stay within the budget of that program, and just keeping it simple, and really want to be able to protect the health of all people, all parties involved, the establishment, the patrons, the employees, and the community at the same time. So having a policy really can be a win-win for everyone, and protective measure, and bring a lot of benefits. So thank you for your time today. I hope that was helpful, and just reach out if you have any more questions.